that come in on certain conduct, certain values. If you can live by them, go. And also enforce discipline. That's our challenge. We actually condone. You have done this mistake, you go back to the village and say, I'm being fought. No. The institution must deal with you right, as a person, and clear this issue.
I remember the letter Bob Collymore in one of the shows. He was saying that corruption is not really heavily pegged on the government side, but also on the private sector. It's where corruption is really rife, and they complement each other at the end of the day. Yeah, I don't know what you really have to say. So it's not really even as Begre is saying, the private sector, they're keeping their powder very dry, but they complement each other.
It's true.
Somehow.
They do, and just to build on what my colleagues have been talking about on camera and KRA, that was the primary question. I didn't know that paying taxes or receiving taxes is a secret. That you have to hide how much you're paying, that you're paying to your government, or your government is actually receiving this amount of money. That is something that should be open. I think places where cameras shouldn't be is in the bedroom, in the toilet, and in some private bedrooms. But elsewhere, I think we should be free because we have nothing to hide. So we understand one of the sentiments about privacy, but it's working very well with U.S. police, and it has actually assisted a lot, not just in evidence collection, but also in holding them accountable, for their actions. Now, what is critical, before I talk about the private sector, is one thing that has been lacking is enforcing and taking action. Consequences are never certain in this country. And so that encourages impunity, Just driving from our homes to here, you're going to see amount of impunity on the road. And that impunity, unfortunately, I have to say it, you'll have a traffic police officer actually watching impunity. So what message is that sending to other players on the road? Or those people who don't even have a conscience, Because those without a conscience, at least some of them, they are restricted by the fear of consequences. But when there is no consequence, they're going to run amok. Now, with regard to the private sector, it is true that there is a degree of corruption and malfeasance in the private sector. It's a reflection of our society. But I think what Brigadier was trying to speak to is because there's an interest in making profit, and in the survival of that company or that institution, they try to minimize and increase efficiency in ways that can actually be able to make the money. Now, the private sector has also fueled some of the corruption in government because of entrepreneurship. We know that. They're the ones who are paying kickbacks and stuff like that. But when it comes to their own business, they run it a little bit differently from the way they're actually engaging, let's say, with the government. And so while they have complement each other by fueling some of the corruption we see by public officers, privately they tend to run the systems better, and that is why they survive. But there is an entitlement towards government. It's almost as if government has unlimited money that it does not matter how much we're going to loot. You can't do that for the private sector because the company is going to collapse. The consequences are going to be clear when it comes to malfeasance and inefficiency.
There's a story that I think, the headlines have faded now, but I looked it up a little bit. The Lands Ministry official whose current home valued 80 million, right? He's just had his assets seized. The assets were worth 1.2 billion shillings, which he acquired through corruption over a period of 15 years only. So he joined the ministry about 15 years ago. Within this period, he has managed to accumulate 1.2 billion shillings worth of assets.
And what was his payslip reading?
Let me just pull that up. His legitimate income within that period was 6.3 million. Now, 6.3 million, but he earned 1.2 million. The man is probably heading to the Olympics in terms of economic what do you call it? Gymnastics.
Gymnastics.
That is the right phrase. Huh? Now, I think for me, we have to congratulate the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission for taking this step, because I think seizure of assets is one way in which you create a deterrent, even as the court process continues. So this person is not guilty until a court pronounces them guilty, right? So let's be clear. He has his right to bail, he has his right to legal advice, and he has the right to a fair trial. However, these assets should be seized and should be held by the state until it is proven by him how he managed to accumulate this amount of wealth over such a short period of time. I think that's the way to go. Seizure of assets.
I think that would be too extreme. And let me say why.
He shouldn't
Too
do
extreme.
Yeah. Seizure of assets. That's because your pay slip is not reflected. This is because we called out the gene ourselves, and we have to also take it back to the bottle if we want. Because the Degwa Commission allowed civil servants and other people to do business, right? And therefore, the payslip is never, ever a true reflection of the legitimate earnings of individuals in this country. And I'm not every extra dime over your payslip is corruption. I think that's the argument we need to make. And until we decide that you cannot be a civil servant and do anything else, that you just serve as a civil servant, you retire, you live on your pension. But the moment we committed ourselves to this capitalist system, then what has happened is that majority of civil servants are farmers. And particularly they are the ones who are having large tracts of land and growing maize and wheat in Narok and elsewhere. So the problem here is not corruption, it is the raw productivity of the civil bureaucracy. Because this is where you have people...
Can I push you on this one a little bit?
Please.
So the issue is not so much that it is pure, this income or these assets purely have come from their income. The issue is that he is not able to explain how else he has been able to make that large amount of money. And I think the question of transparency, particularly from a revenue taxation perspective, KRA has a legitimate right to ask you, how have you earned this money? If you cannot explain it, it should be seized. And investigations essentially demonstrate what actually have you been doing for the last 15 years to generate 1.2 billion shillings.
1.2 billion. No, that's even small. There are people with the trillions. But this is also, get it this way. By virtue of holding a certain public office, you become a director of certain local and international companies. You get? Because those companies want to use your position in order to augment their prowess within a certain market.
But that is speculation. Let me just read the statement from the EACC. We have established that he illegally acquired the assets when he entered into contracts with property development companies, organizations, and members of the public, which is where the private sector comes, to facilitate valuation, payment of government stamp duty, title processing, and purportedly conducting forensic audit services. This is it seems to be a very clear case, but as I say, we cannot judge him in this space, and I've deliberately left out his name. It's in the public domain, but he needs essentially to go to court and establish his innocence.
Thank you. Thank you. Even as winding up on that particular bit of Adele is the question of the privacy. Still on KRA, even with the candid cameras, we've noted, and it's been in the public domain and the dailies and media as well, that they will be using drones. You know, drones will be hovering over your business premises, to sort of really spy on you, what sort of deals you're doing. This is in light of also trying to be very, no, it is there. So that's what I'm saying. Where do we really draw the line? Where do we really? So you're in your office, you know, you're keying away on your laptop, and then you can see a drone there from KRA. You're looking at your laptop and trying to, these are things to snoop around to see if you are actually putting your your ducks in a row as far as taxes are concerned.
That's why I have a problem because
for our marriages.
Because where do the line between spying on me as a worker for a certain organization and on me as a Kenyan citizen? That line needs to be drawn. That's an overreach.
It's an overreach.
I think in countries like, let's say, South Africa, where I have some little experience, in the US, the issue is that the anti-corruption architecture is so light at the top. It's not heavy. It's scorpion. And so the moment you see scorpion coming to your compound, you know they are coming because there's something that has been detected, which is abnormal. You don't need all the cameras because you concentrate of your energy on one unit. Here we are top heavy with all this anti-corruption commission. There is DPP, there is DCI, there is the police itself, there is the KRA, there is everybody is. So there's no coordination between, clear coordination between these agencies by law. At least you can say you meet on a Monday or a Friday, but that's nonsensical. The whole issue is there is no authority that is governing all this. So we need one agency that deals with this, and they come through your gate. Then you are by law going to face this. The Corruption and the Ethics and Corruption Commission has actually become, a catwalk, a place for catwalks. You go there, you are rounded, and then you go back and still more. So the public knows that so and so was not like this 10 years ago, and there is no miracle or the gymnastics that can transform you this, irrespective of whether you're investing or you are milking cows or you have chicken, the whole of
milking chickens.
Milking chicken. There is nothing that can make you rich. Yet,
snake farming.
Yet you are
snake
this.
farming, to go to another.
And nobody's coming for you, or nobody's asking any question. So it's a question of credibility gap.
Yes.
Well, Professor, you're right in terms of the departments working in silos. Yet they are all one system.
Yes.
And the concept we are pushing for now is a whole of government approach. That you all come together, discuss on the table, and go as one entity, not as different entities. And you avoid the issue of internal fighting among yourselves. It's one face of government, the whole of government. So we want to see that effort towards that common endeavor. And I would add also that we've come a long way, because in the past it used to be a situation where you'll accuse the government intelligence of following people all over to see what you are doing and all that. And over time, we have seen it wasn't necessary. Now we are saying, it's you to invite us to yourself. When you see a change of lifestyle, change of patterns, you're inviting us. I'm only saying the pace has been slow a bit. This needs to be further activated so that we follow people much more, see what they are doing, and the boundary between being a public servant and being a businessman. And also the fact that sometimes the two not clash but support each other. That you're coming through your wife to take a contract in where you're serving as a government officer.
Yes.
Your wife, your children. No,
children, yes.
No, we can't operate this way. And when I joined the armed forces myself, many years back, almost 40 years back, it was very clear for me, I can't do business. I have come to serve this government. I've made a sacrifice. And therefore, my job is what I've been paid. I had no other business. Of course, later on, we were left behind because when we retired, we had no place to go back. There were we had built ourselves. We were actually serving government all through. I'm happy that today we have the veterans bill that will take care of those people.
Now
go back to barracks.
It has been enacted.
Go back to barracks. Take care of this country professionally. Don't do business. We'll take care of you. A very good move indeed. I thank government for that. Yes.
Right.
It took a long time for that.
It did. I'm happy it's now in place, and I'm sure
it's one of the great things.
Very soon we will discuss, what it entails for the public. There are a bit of issues here and there being raised, but we'll make it clear what it stands for, why it is necessary, and why it should be supported.
They should do it for professors as well. Because we retire home very miserable fellows. Yes, we are given a long retirement. I can work up to 76 or so years. But when I desperately need that help, I don't have it. And if you have to be a good academician or a scholar, not one who is just a consultant, you need to have a stable mind and go to the library. You work for 24 hours in the archives, in the darkness, without anybody, so that you bring truth to the public. But now, because of that, what majority of us are consultants. Moonlighting is it? Ask one professor, where do you teach? They have even forgotten. They are employed in this university, but they moonlight in every They say, we say which university we think is going to be more prestigious to us. Because I am teaching at Kenya, teaching at the University of Nairobi, I'm USIU, I'm Nazarene, I'm everywhere.
Your team?
I'm an external examiner at Teams Online.
It was only a matter of time the gig economy showed up in our universities. These are gig economy workers. Right?
Yes, indeed. Let's go so far to Rwanda, where of course we have the Commonwealth heads of government meeting, and this is what is on the front page of the New Times in Rwanda. Prince Charles in Kigali, Prince of Wales, is designated successor of the Queen as head of Commonwealth. It is on page 4, and this is in light of what we've been following as well with the UK Rwanda immigrants. That particular development that we had last week, and the European Human Rights Court intervening, that we shouldn't have migrants really coming. We had that statement from Prince Charles that that policy is pathetic. Was it a pathetic, if I may remember him saying, right? It was a pathetic policy. And now he's in Kigali for the Commonwealth head of government, of course, a meeting that is ongoing in Kigali there. Could we just comment on that particular, especially Irungi Houghton, with that particular policy? Just the other day also we were observing the World Refugee Day, and still we have the foreign minister of UK insisting that this has to go on regardless of what the world is saying.
I mean, the organization is Amnesty, and myself personally, we are against this policy. It is definitely an affront to the Geneva Convention. It is a shirking of the UK government's responsibility for, essentially a protection of asylum seekers. I was going to say rendition, that may be a strong word, but to essentially relocate people who are seeking sanctuary in a country, in a modern state, against their will to another state, is just not the kind of standard that we would expect to see within a nation that is that has a history of refugee sanctuary. I mean, one of the interesting things, I don't know if you saw during the Queen's birthday party, there was this wonderful little video of the Queen having tea with Paddington Bear. And I was reminded that Paddington Bear was actually, was a character that was built around the idea of refugee coming to the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a bit of a history that actually most of us don't remember. I only know it because I spent a bit of time in UK education, so it was developed as a story. But I think the United Kingdom has really just betrayed several decades of refuge and sanctuary for asylum seekers all over the world. And I am sure, and this is just a prediction, that this will be used discriminately. They will be people of a darker hue, people of color, that will be sent to Rwanda, and the people who are closer to the majority white Anglo-Saxon majority in the UK will be given access to the UK. So we're going to see, I think, racial discrimination, if not just a violation of refugee rights.
All right.
It needs to be appealed. It needs to be withdrawn. And we're very supportive of the European Court at this time.
I remember also, Dr. Kaneja, you had very strong sentiments on this in light of what the world is going through. With the phasing out of other races. I don't know, I can't remember that particular moniker as we speak or we continue the conversation, I'll remember it. But where do you see this headed? And now that we have Charles in Kigali, who was protesting this, do you think this conversation might be put on the table?
Perhaps to some extent. Kigali is kind of, right now, is the last born child of the Commonwealth. And is being pampered in some ways, and I think it's a diplomatic coup in some ways by Paul Kagame. But as I did mention, this is global apartheid at its best. And I alluded to the fact that, like a number of Western European countries, the UK is literally, giving money to its citizens to take in Ukrainian refugees. Okay. Yet at the same time, it's actually sending some refugees to the guerrillas in Rwanda. Now, no offense to Rwanda, but when people have applied for asylum, for refuge in country A, that is where they want to be. Why do you decide to send them to country B that is actually a couple thousand miles away? Probably, if those people were given a choice, they may not make that decision. They will not probably even have applied for asylum if they knew that was going to happen to them. And I do agree with my colleagues. Chances are the black and brown people probably are the ones who are going to find their way in Kigali if that in fact happens. And so at the time when we are asking the world, and especially the way Europe and the West has been, very aggressive in taking in Ukrainian refugees, who, in the words of a lot of Western media, because they look like us and they have blue eyes and blonde hair, it could not have gotten worse in terms of optics, for the rest of the world. And if this, in fact, goes ahead, it's actually going to affect the Western moral high ground that they have had, especially when it comes to human rights, humanitarian issues, and the like, claiming morality going forward is going to be very difficult. And that is going somehow to disturb the kind of international order that we have heard with regard to our common understanding of human rights, humanitarian laws and principles, and even just that spirit of the Commonwealth. What is common if we actually cannot do things in a certain way that is standard? What is common? Ukraine is not even part of the Commonwealth. If we can bring in Ukrainian refugees and we say we're part of the Commonwealth, well, those who are coming from the Commonwealth countries, because a lot of those asylums, I can bet, they're coming from the Commonwealth countries, we decide, no, they are not very common with us. We need to send them elsewhere in the hills of Kigali. I think that is horrible. And, in the 21st century, that should not be happening. Someone should be ashamed of the decision in London.
All right. Let's hear from Professor.
I concur with Hanenje on the issue of global appetite that is beginning to emerge. But the only footnote I would add to this is that exporting refugees, or the refugee problem, is not a new policy in Britain. It's only that we are very oblivious of history. The British decided to export Polish refugees from Europe to Africa, and they were settled in Tanzania and elsewhere. Also, Jewish refugees, particularly from Eastern Europe, were brought here, and because Kenya was a white man's colony or land, they could not be allowed to sit here, so they had to be pushed to Uganda, particularly Western Uganda and Northern Tanzania. And it's only after 1954 that would now be re-exported to Australia and Canada, and some to Argentina. I'm talking about our own experiences, the East Africans. And therefore, East Africa has been the backyard for Britain in terms of exportation of its refugees, particularly those who are not desirable within the metropole. And this is what we are seeing now reproduced in Rwanda. And in Rwanda, first and foremost, congratulations to Rwanda for this metamorphosis from a francophonic country to an anglophonic country. That's a wonderful metamorphosis. And two, now to take the lead in terms of the core colonial policies of the British, that now Rwanda is the new haven. In the past, Uganda has been the old haven of re-exported refugees. If you are from Poland, you are seeking asylum in Britain, you are re-exported to the East African, and so on and so forth. So, and it's an extension of what we have been calling the refugee studies, the Fortress Europe. In other words, it is an anti-migration policy that ensures that people of color do not find asylum in these countries. So it's basically global appetite, in the sense that anybody else is around except people of color, whether you are Asians or you're Africans, you do not find your way into Europe. And now this is fueled by rising populism and isolationism, which has meant that anti-migration movements and groups are the ones calling political shots. And you find this in elections, where there are elections, or where there are right-wing leaders, like in Britain, Boris Johnson and others. This is where you get this kind of a policy. And you can support Prince Charles when he said no to this, because I don't think he's a right-winger like the Prime Minister in that country. So yeah, this is it. Global appetite in terms of refugees.
Thank you. Right, global appetite. We want now to buckle down a bit to just discuss the topic of the day. And this is a long-awaited closure for DRC Congo. We had Belgium, which has handed over a tooth, the only known remains of the murdered Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumba to his family during a ceremony in Brussels on Monday. Lumumba became the Democratic Republic of Congo's first democratically elected prime minister after independence from Belgium in 1960, but alarmed the West with overtures to Moscow at the height of the Cold War. His government lasted just 3 months before he was overthrown and assassinated by a firing squad. His supporters and some historians accused the CIA of having ordered his killing. His body was never found. A Belgium official handed a blue box containing the tooth to members of his family at Egmont Palace in central Brussels on Monday. And in a speech, Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo said, quote unquote, "It isn't normal that the Belgians held on to the remains of one of the founding fathers of the Congolese nation for 6 decades. DRC Prime Minister Jean-Michel Sama Lukonde called Lumumba a national hero and said his death and suppression of his supporters hurt not only the victims' families but the country as a whole. Lumumba's daughter Juliana, who in 2020 sent a letter to Belgium's king asking for her father's remains to be returned, said there was still a lot that is known about the final moment of her father's life. A Belgian parliamentary investigation into his killing concluded in 2002 that Belgium was morally responsible for Lumumba's death. The tooth was reportedly taken from Lumumba's body by a Belgian policeman, Gerard Soit, who claimed to have dissolved much of Lumumba's body in acid and burned the rest.
qu'il n'y a rien qui puisse exprimer comme...
We have to admit that nothing can express what we are feeling today.
Nous ne pouvons que formuler ce vœu.
We can only wish that wherever you are,
Ce vœu que tu puisses, Père, de là où tu es,
you can be proud of your children,
de là où tu te trouves, être fier de tes enfants
your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren,
et de tes arrière-petits-enfants. Père, à présent,
Father, welcome back to the country.
au pays.
Thank you.
And we just want to put that into perspective with the panelists here, looking at the history of DRC, where it is, the seed that was sown by the Belgians. It's taken so many decades for Patrice Lumumba to finally have a closure. Only a tooth. Only a tooth is what is left of Patrice Lumumba all those years. And it has been also kept in the Belgium for the longest time ever. Could we just start from there, Dr. Kanenje?
The tooth puts Belgium squarely at the scene of the crime. Dr. Martin Luther King used to remind us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. It's been 60, 70 years in the making, but I think we have to go beyond what happened, which is criminal, and actually get some justice. Now, what is the responsibility of those who are behind, considering the Belgians' own complicity in the issue? And I think beyond mere statements of apology, something needs to be done in the form of reparations. And we make no apologies for demanding reparations. The murder of Patrice Lumumba, not only did it challenge some of the hopes and constrain some of the opportunities that would have come as a result of his vision for Congo, for the continent. But it changed the entire history of the continent as we know it. And it set in motion a series of dictatorships supported by one part of the Cold War in ways that was fundamentally flawed and that actually hurt this continent deeply. From Mozambique to Angola, from West Africa to other parts of the continent. And so this has to be followed by not just strong statements, but what the form of reparations, what are they going to do with the families? This is the first time many people are actually seeing any family member from the Lumumba's side. The first time this being discussed seriously. And remember, it wasn't even an apology that was made, it was a regret that was expressed. When the truth is placing you at the scene of the crime, you have to do more. And we make no apologies, and it's about time, actually, Congo got justice it deserved. For years, when it was a property of the King of Belgium, then ravaged and raped by the plunder, given independence when it wasn't even ready. Only 9 graduates were in Congo in 1960 by the time the country was being given, because it was never prepared sufficiently to actually take over. No wonder we got the Mobutus for the next 30 years. And of course, we know the history of what happened in Congo. It's about time, and we must change course.
Right, so just returning a tooth does not really suffice. For all those years, something has to be done in regard to repatriation or restorative justice, I should say, for Lumumba and the family, and the Congolese as well, from the Belgians. Well, because they're just saying, of course, they've returned it, and we feel guilty, and that's it. So what measures can be taken to make sure that at least something is done to repay what they did to Patrice?
I think first and foremost, the first move to be taken is to reconceptualize Congo differently, particularly in the minds of the Belgians and their fellow Europeans. Because Congo, unlike other colonies, was not conceived as a country. It was a personal property of Leopold II. And he ran it as such. And therefore, when he's killing and cutting the hands of the Congolese, who are not quick enough to tap into the rubber and whatever other things we're trying to extract, they were not doing it because they are doing it to citizens or nationals of a certain country. They were doing it because this is a private property. And you remember when Leopold was dying, he handed over the property to Belgium. So this is the first time Belgium now takes it as its property. And Belgium is such a tiny country in Europe without any significance other than being a buffer between France and Britain. I mean, we're talking about European history. We're not talking about nations today.
You need to be a bit more modest.
No, I'm modest.
Significance.
No. I am modest. I'm saying this. Luxembourg and Belgium were created as buffer zone between. So when you overrun Belgium or you overrun Luxembourg, then Britain know that this war is headed my way. And then they will prepare for the war and so on. Now, Rwanda, Djibouti, whatever, these are now sovereign states within the United Nations. Nobody doesn't know that. But we are saying it was a gift to the country of Belgium. And as a gift, the question is whether the Belgians see it differently today from that time. And what we are going to discuss here as the tribulations of Congo stem from that issue. So Mobutu was not really what quote-unquote a president. He was a farm manager or an estate manager. And therefore, a lot was expected on him to run Congo in a certain way. So what we are now beginning to see is the new leaders elected by the Congolese is essentially an abnormality in this huge estate that they have been managing. Lumumba is killed so brutally because he's like a slave who misbehaved. It's not very different from the lynchings that you'd get from the United States. Every Saturday, they would all gang together around the huge tree to lynch one Negro. And so we have after church. You go to church, you worship, then you go in the afternoon to enjoy a lynching of one of the the niggers who didn't perform well in the estates. So it's a culture that we're talking about. So the fact that somebody will keep somebody's tooth as a trophy is obnoxious. It's so dehumanizing. And then you come and have this huge ceremony about it. The issue is there must be a kind of apology, an equivocal apology to the Congolese people for centuries of this kind of brutalization, and begin to understand that Congo was the best of us in Africa. We're not talking about the backyard country. It's the only place where we had kings and queens who had morals, and queens who have entered the annals of our history as the best among our best. Yet it was the most brutalized. Now Congo continued to go through that. Even today, the United Nations has insisted on the longest peacekeeping mission that never ends in Congo. And whose interest is it serving? This is a big, whose interest is the peacekeeping mission in Congo serving if it cannot end the war in almost 60 years? We now see Uhuru Kenyatta is going to the Congo to end this conflict. His father was there in 1963, 61, I mean 63, 64, doing the same. So Africans were still misused in terms of showing a semblance of, normalization of things. But the truth of the matter is that Congo need to be taken more seriously, and I'm happy. It is now part of the East African, and we, the East Africans, and the Africans in general, have been committed to Congo than to any other country in terms of our conscience. We have named our children after Lumumba. We have named our children, even our daughters. Sometimes we just decide to call them Patrice. No, we know the Patrice is a male name, but we want to have Lumumba captured in this. That's how strong our emotions about Congo are.
All right, thank you. Can you allow me just to take a short break right now, and then we just run the commercials and we come back. We'll just pick it up with you, Brigadier, and also Irungu Houghton as well. That is the current state of play. Even as Congo receives that particular tooth, we know that the procession will be going on today as well. A quick stopover in Kinshasa today to also Lumumbaville in the central DRC province of Sankuru, where he was born. And it is Lumumbaville, named after Lumumba, that the family of the illustrious Prime Minister will officially lead the mourning. And then the coffin will leave Lumumbaville for Kisangani, and Lumumba's political stronghold in the northeast of the DRC, where his followers organized resistance against the Kinshasa government in 1964, and after the death of their leader. Now on Sunday, June 26th, the coffin will arrive in Lubumbashi, in what is now the southern province of Haut Katanga, where he was assassinated. We take a short break right now, don't go away.